my husband spat. "That fat woman disgusts me." I acted like I didn't hear anything, and the next day, Serena Rhodes was 42 when the last illusion of her marriage died. Her eyes were a warm, steady brown, the kind that made people confess things without knowing why. Her body, soft and full, had never fit the cruelly narrow standards of the East Coast circles she'd been born into. Old money wrapped her name like a heavy coat, but what people noticed most wasn't her wealth. It was the calm dignity in the way she listened, as if every person she met carried a story worth protecting. Behind her back, those same people called her the fat heiress. They compared her to a distant cousin they hated and laughed at the way she filled a room. Her husband was one of them. Malik Sterling, 7 years younger than she was, liked to present himself as a rising political star. In public, he had charm and charisma. In private, he was calculating in an expensive suit, a man who looked at life as a game board and people as pieces to be moved. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. That morning, in their mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, the air smelled of jasmine and dark roast coffee. It was Malik's birthday. The private chef had prepared an elaborate brunch. Serena had filled the living room with fresh flowers and placed a small velvet box beside a cream envelope on the sideboard. In the box, a gleaming Rolex she knew he'd been eyeing, less for the craftsmanship and more for how it would glitter in campaign photos. In the envelope, a certificate for a $100,000 donation made in his name to a national children's charity. She knew there was nothing he loved more than appearing generous. At 10:16 a.m., she descended the grand staircase, heels muted on thick carpet, envelope in hand. The dining room was empty. Voices drifted from the adjoining parlor. She paused, habit making her move quietly. The door was already slightly ajar. Without meaning to eavesdrop, she simply stopped. "That woman disgusts me, Mom," Malik's voice said, light and amused. "You think I actually enjoy going to bed with her? I'm here for her money, nothing else." Serena's lungs forgot how to work. She didn't move, didn't blink. On the sofa, his mother, Estelle Sterling, sounded tired, but not surprised. "Then keep pretending," she replied calmly. "Play the loving husband until every last asset is secured. You know what to do when you've taken everything. Her days in your life are numbered. Do you really want to be tied to that body forever? She looks like a stuffed piñata of regrets." They both laughed, an easy, careless laugh that belonged to people who had never questioned their right to be cruel. The envelope slid from Serena's fingers and fell to the carpet without a sound. Her face remained composed, but her legs trembled as if the house had shifted under her. She stepped back slowly, climbed the stairs without letting her heels betray her, and closed her bedroom door as carefully as if the world on the other side already suspected she was awake. She didn't cry. She didn't confront them. That night, she smiled through dinner, toasted to Malik's birthday, and watched him open his watch with feigned delight. Estelle complimented the wine and casually recommended Serena try a friend's diet, a suggestion that made Malik smirk. Their laughter brushed past her like cold air. Serena answered with a serenity that had nothing to do with peace and everything to do with decision. Past midnight, when the mansion had settled into silence, Serena walked barefoot through its rooms. The paintings she had chosen with care stared back at her. Italian furniture, polished until it gleamed, caught the light of the garden lamps. The glossy, untouched grand piano sat like a stage prop for a life that had never been performed. Every object testified to a role she had played without ever believing the script. In the study, she sat at the desk and pulled a sheet of paper from a drawer. Her hand was steady as she wrote, "Thank you for finally showing me who you are." No name. No explanation. She folded the note and left it where he would find it. Then she opened her laptop. Years of managing her family's fortune had taught her the language of numbers and loopholes. In less than an hour, she had contacted a discreet broker, initiated the sale of the house, and directed the funds to accounts far beyond Malik's reach. With a few carefully structured transfers, the bulk of her wealth moved into a secure Swiss account under a new identity. The life they had built together, at least on paper, dissolved without a ripple. By dawn, the mansion was behind her. No staff saw her slip out the service door. She carried only a backpack, a long coat, her passport, a small roll of cash, and a faded photograph of herself at 18, barefoot on a beach, arms wide to the ocean, before the weight of the Sterling name had turned her into a polished ornament. 2 hours later, Malik woke to a quiet house. He called her name once, twice. Checked the kitchen, the garden, the guest rooms. In their bedroom, he found only a slip of paper on the pillow. "Thank you for finally showing me who you are." He crumpled the note with a scoff. He assumed she had stormed out, indulging in emotional nonsense. Her phone went straight to voicemail. His text messages remained unread. When he called Estelle, frustration cracked his voice. "She left," he snapped. "All she wrote was some melodramatic line about me showing my true colors." What is that supposed to mean? For the first time in a long while, Estelle felt something close to fear run through her. It was a thin line beneath her words when she asked, "Have you checked the accounts?" By evening, the truth began to emerge. The mansion sale had closed in record time. The funds had bypassed every joint account and landed in a new destination he couldn't access. Everything they owned, even his suits, was legally in Serena's name. He had underestimated the woman he had treated like furniture. A few days later, a financial document related to the sale landed on the desk of a reporter who had been digging into Malik's campaign finances. It was a technical leak, a bureaucratic mishap. It was also a lit match in a dry forest. While screens in distant cities began to flicker with speculation about a scandal, a bus crawled through the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago. Serena sat by the window, her backpack in her lap, her photo tucked into her coat like a secret. Her chest rose and fell steadily. For the first time in years, breathing didn't feel like work. The bus driver announced, "South Shore, last stop," without looking back. Serena stood. No one on the bus recognized her. To them, she was just another tired woman in an oversized coat with more past than luggage. She stepped onto the cracked sidewalk of a wounded neighborhood, one with battered facades, stubborn plants pushing through broken concrete, children splashing in murky puddles, women sweeping stoops while balancing babies on their hips, and a food truck sending up the scent of barbecue and smoke. A handwritten sign taped to a gate made her pause. "Room for rent. Shared bath." No questions asked. She knocked. A woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and skeptical, opened the door. "Looking for something?" Serena met her gaze. "I saw the sign. I need a room. I can pay for the month in advance." The landlady's eyes moved over her carefully. The posture, the smooth hands, the careful grooming, all wrong for this block, this worn front porch. "Name." Serena hesitated only a heartbeat. The new name slid into the space where her old life had been. Maya Soul. "That's a strange name," the woman muttered, stepping aside. "The room's small. No refunds. I don't like trouble." "You won't get any from me, Serena," now Maya promised, stepping into walls stained with damp air that smelled of dust and old paint. The twin bed, the rattling fan, the single grimy window felt less like a fall and more like an escape tunnel. That night, she stretched out on the hard mattress. She didn't cry. She didn't replay Malik's words. She simply stared at the cracked ceiling and let silence wash over her, as if every second of quiet scrubbed away another layer of the life that had tried to suffocate her. The next morning, she walked the streets without a plan, camouflaged by anonymity. When neighbors asked, she said she'd lost everything to fraud and bad investments. It wasn't a lie. She simply left out who had really tried to steal her life. A peeling sign above an old brick building caught her eye. A community health clinic. Inside, 2 rusted exam tables, a handful of mismatched plastic chairs, and a makeshift reception desk made of stacked cardboard boxes greeted her. A weary woman argued with a young man behind the counter about medicine she couldn't afford. "I told you, ma'am," the man said gently, exhaustion in the dark circles under his eyes. "We don't have that antibiotic in stock. I can't promise what you'll get if you buy it on the street." But bring your boy back anyway. We don't turn anyone away. When the woman left, Serena stepped forward. Are you the doctor? The man pushed a hand through his messy hair. Jonah Vance. I'm the one doing my best to be. I'd like to help, she said. Volunteer. I have experience managing budgets, logistics, and donations. Maybe I can organize inventory, coordinate support. He studied her for a beat too long. There was something in her voice, clarity, precision, that didn't belong to someone who'd supposedly lost everything. But he only extended his hand. We need hands more than answers. Welcome, Maya. And just like that, under a borrowed name and in a place that didn't care who she was before, her second life began. Days folded into a rhythm that had nothing to do with gala dinners or charity galas. Maya washed stained sheets, stacked boxes of expired bandages, swept floors, and learned which drawers hid the good gauze and which squeaked loud enough to wake coughing children. The clinic needed everything and had almost nothing, except stubborn determination. No one asked for her resume. No one mentioned last names. In the South Shore, your value was measured in what you did, not what you owned. One afternoon, an older woman arrived with a thin girl whose eyes seemed too big for her face. The child's hair fell in dull strands, her skin a shade too pale. The girl sat on the exam table with an old doll missing an arm, whispering secrets to it while Jonah examined her. She hasn't eaten for 3 days, the woman said. She burns at night. I'm scared, doctor. Jonah's jaw tightened. He ordered tests, then stepped into the hallway, leaning against the wall as if it held him upright. Serena, sorting crumpled forms nearby, saw the way his shoulders sagged. What is it? She asked quietly. I think it's leukemia, he admitted, voice low. But we need lab work, and that costs money they don't have. Serena looked back through the open door. The girl, Lila, according to the chart, was making her doll dance clumsily. Even from a distance, Serena could see the shadow of fatigue beneath her smile. Later, while they waited for Jonah to return, Lila's guardian, a woman everyone called Miss D, approached Serena with a knowing look. You're not from here, she observed. Your shoulders are too straight. Life here bends people a little. And your hands. Those are hands that sign documents, not hands that scrubbed public bathrooms. Serena almost laughed, but her throat wouldn't let her. I'm just trying to start over, she replied. Of course you are, Miss D said softly. Listen, child. Some people look at women and only see bodies. Other people look and see souls. Be careful who you let see you. That doctor has the second kind of eyes. I can tell. 2 weeks later, Lila practically lived at the clinic. So did Serena. When they weren't cleaning or sorting boxes, they drew with sidewalk chalk and spun ridiculous stories about superheroes who wore mismatched socks. Lila stuck to her as if she had been waiting her whole life for this particular grown-up to appear. Have you ever felt invisible? Lila asked one morning, her voice serious as they colored a crooked sun. Serena didn't think before answering. Yes. Many times. Then we match, Lila declared. When people get scared, they look away. If nobody looks at you, you disappear. Serena swallowed the ache in her chest. She wondered how many times she herself had turned her gaze away from pain, protected by tinted windows and schedules full of meaningless obligations. The idea for the fair began as a desperate attempt to raise funds and turned into the neighborhood's first real celebration in months. Music spilled from borrowed speakers. Food stands appeared like magic. Women sold pastries, knitted scarves, handmade jewelry. Men grilled over makeshift pits, fanning the smoke with pieces of cardboard. It was Serena who made it happen. She scheduled tables, convinced shop owners to donate their sidewalks for the day, filled notebooks with lists of volunteers and tasks until the pages smelled like ink and fatigue. At one point, Miss D watched her organize a chaotic line of children waiting for face paint. I don't know who you were before, Maya, she said, kneading dough at a folding table. But who you are now suits this place. Serena had stopped hesitating when people called her by her new name. Maya Soul was no longer just a disguise. It was an armor, a possibility. Behind the curtains of the small office, she overheard Jonah one evening talking to a nurse about a former patient. Estelle Sterling, he said. Private client. I lost my job when I refused to sign off on illegal prescriptions for wealthy addicts. Her son threatened my career if I opened my mouth. The name hit Serena like a slap. Sterling. Estelle. The walls seemed to tilt for a second. Their lives had been entangled long before Chicago, long before the bus. The system that had protected Malik had also broken Jonah. That night, after the fair's laughter had melted into the distant wail of sirens, Serena climbed onto the roof of her boarding house. The wind tugged at her hair. For the first time since she ran, she let herself cry, quiet tears that carried guilt for all the years she had lived above suffering, watching it from a safe distance. While Serena learned to live on cheap coffee and shared bathrooms, Malik's carefully constructed world started to crack. News leaked about irregularities in his campaign finances, about suspicious timing in the sale of the Greenwich mansion, about a missing wife whose disappearance was far less romantic than the pundits liked to imagine. He slammed whiskey glasses against walls and shouted orders at lawyers who no longer returned his calls as quickly. "Find her," he told the private investigator he'd hired. "I don't care how. I need her back before this destroys me." The investigator, a man with tired eyes and the flat calm of someone who'd seen too much, followed the faint trails she'd left behind. Cash withdrawals, a ticket purchased under an unfamiliar name, blurry footage of a woman with Serena's posture boarding a bus. Back in South Shore, Serena had discovered an old warehouse at the edge of the neighborhood. Its roof sagged, windows boarded, graffiti curling over rusted metal. To everyone else, it was just another carcass of a building. To her, it looked like a beginning. She stood in the dust and imagined dormitories, a kitchen, counseling rooms, a garden where women could sit without looking over their shoulders. A sanctuary for those who'd been used, hit, silenced, discarded. A place where no one would have to lie about their name just to feel safe. At night, she filled a thick notebook with plans, budgets, supply lists, contacts. She scribbled titles like House of Second Chances and crossed them out until one phrase stuck in her chest. Maya Soul Foundation, a small echo of the woman she was pretending to be and slowly becoming. Jonah helped however he could, showing up with second-hand chairs, talking to volunteers, trusting her ideas more each day. One night, as they sat in the half-lit warehouse, he told her about the wife he had lost to misdiagnosed pneumonia. "We paid for the best," he said bitterly. "They gave us mistakes wrapped in marble halls." Serena listened, realizing that money had never been a guarantee of safety, just another disguise. The fair turned out better than anyone dared hope. Lila ran from stall to stall, selling braided thread bracelets with infectious enthusiasm. Her laughter bounced off the old brick walls like sunlight. For a few hours, everything felt possible. Then she collapsed. It happened without warning, in the middle of the crowd. 1 second she was laughing, the next, her knees buckled, and blood trickled from her nose. The music died. Jonah sprinted across the pavement, scooping her up. "Clear the way," he shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. Serena followed, her pulse roaring in her ears. At the clinic, they rushed to stabilize Lila. Tests confirmed what Jonah had feared. The leukemia had advanced rapidly. Treatment options existed, but not for the kind of budget stamped on the clinic's ledger. That night, Serena sat on the edge of her thin mattress, backpack open. At the bottom lay the only luxury she had kept hidden, a sapphire ring her grandmother had once called our family's sky. It could have bought another car, another watch, another meaningless symbol in her old life. Now it was a lifeline. In the morning, she returned to the clinic with a sealed envelope. The check inside would be enough to start Lila's treatment in a proper hospital. Miss D didn't ask how she had gotten the money. Neither did Jonah. They respected the silence around her sacrifice, even as it changed the way Jonah looked at her. His gaze lost the last trace of doubt and filled with something like awe. "You didn't come here just to hide," he told her later. when they were alone in the storage room. You came to rebuild, even if you're doing it behind a lie. Serena wanted to tell him everything. Her real name, the ALS diagnosis she had carried like a quiet shadow for a year, the inheritance she had redirected, the husband she had left. The words rose and fell back inside her. Lila, her head wrapped in a soft scarf, slipped a red thread bracelet onto Serena's wrist the next day. "So you won't leave," she said sleepily. "Now you're tied to me." "I was long before this," Serena replied, kissing her forehead. Fear still lived in her chest, but something stronger now stood beside it. The lie she lived under, Maya's soul, had begun as a mask. Now it breathed, pulsed, demanded choices. Lies kept you alive sometimes, but they also learned to hunt you if you wore them too long. Serena could feel hers stirring, restless, waiting. One grey morning, Serena woke before the alarm, dread pressing on her ribs. Lila's treatment had started, but the medication was brutal, the bills relentless. The ring money had opened the door. It would not keep it open forever. At the clinic, Jonah watched her with a new intensity. He had always noticed details, how she never complained about the long hours, how she never shared stories from before, how her eyes clouded when she heard certain names. That morning, as he counted boxes of donated supplies, a question slipped out. "Maya, did you ever live abroad?" he asked. "You have that kind of accent people pick up at international schools. Not something you usually find around here." She didn't flinch, but it took effort. "I studied in Europe for a while," she replied smoothly. "Worked in DC later." "It sticks in your voice." He nodded, but the curiosity in his expression deepened. That night, she went to the warehouse to escape the weight of his gaze. Alone among concrete and dust, she opened her notebook and wrote one sentence across 3 lines. "Fear is a cage whose doors are already open." Footsteps crunched behind her. Miss D appeared, carrying a bag that smelled of fresh bread. "The girl was asking for you," she said, placing the bag on an overturned crate. "You weren't at the clinic." "I needed to think," Serena replied. "I need this place built before everything collapses again." Miss D studied her for a long moment. "You didn't run because of money," she said finally. "You ran because of something that eats you from the inside. You don't run from love, child. You only run from fear. Who are you so afraid of?" Serena opened her mouth and found only one answer. "Myself," she whispered. The older woman nodded as if she'd expected that. She rested a hand on Serena's shoulder, a brief, firm touch, and left without another word. Hours away, Malik stared at a photo on his laptop screen. It had been posted by a volunteer at a small charity fair in South Shore. A laughing crowd, a jumble of tables. In the background, barely in focus, stood a woman with familiar eyes, a familiar way of holding herself despite the cheap clothes. He zoomed in until the pixels blurred. All the breath left his lungs. "Get the car," he told his driver, voice perfectly calm. "We're going to Chicago." The black SUV slid into the South Shore like a foreign object. People watched from doorways, wariness in their eyes. Serena was returning from buying cheap gauze when she saw it parked outside the clinic. Time stretched. The car looked almost identical to the one that used to wait for her outside boutiques and restaurants. Her body moved before her mind did. She turned away, choosing side streets, cutting through alleys, climbing a small rise and ducking behind a crumbling wall. From there, she watched as the SUV idled, then pulled away. Malik had not seen her. Not yet. That night, she lay awake listening to the fan rattle. The fear she thought she'd outgrown came back like an old illness. The fear of being found and dragged back into a life that had never been hers. 2 walls away, Lila clutched her red bracelet and talked to Serena in her sleep. "Are you sad?" Lila asked the next day, noticing the shadows under her eyes. "A little," Serena admitted. "Why?" "You saved me." "Because I still don't know how to save myself," Serena said before she could stop the words. From the doorway, Jonah heard them. Something tore inside him. That evening, after the clinic had emptied, he sat alone in the cramped office. The guilt of his curiosity wrestled with his need for truth. At last, he opened his laptop. He typed the name that had been circling his mind for weeks, the name Miss D had once mentioned when gossiping about politicians on the TV. Serena Rhodes' vanished wife. The search flooded the screen with images. Serena, in gowns and tailored suits, smiling beside Malik at charity balls, appearing in glossy magazine spreads. Articles about a mysterious disappearance, a sudden mansion sale, questions about irregular finance reports. Her photograph, with the same eyes, the same mouth he now recognized in the woman who mopped clinic floors, stared back at him from a dozen banners. He read late into the night, the blue light etching lines into his face. When he finally shut the laptop, he felt as if he stood at the edge of a cliff. He could pretend he didn't know. Or he could step forward. The next morning, he found her sitting on the clinic's front steps with her notebook closed on her lap. She didn't look startled when he said, "We need to talk." "Yes," she replied quietly. "We do." They walked to the warehouse. Light filtered through cracked windows. Dust hung in the air. "Why did you lie?" Jonah asked, keeping his voice level. "Because if I told the truth, I would be hunted," she said. "Because he would find me and use me again. Because I didn't have the strength to be someone's decorative possession anymore." "Serena Rhodes," he said, tasting the syllables. "Wife of Malik Sterling. Heiress." The missing woman turned into a scandal. "They painted you as a mystery, not a person." "Of course they did," she replied, a bitter smile flickering. "A rich woman leaving a powerful man makes a better copy than a sick woman refusing to die as someone else's ornament." He frowned. "Sick." She drew in a breath, then let out the truth she had carried alone. "I have ALS," she said. "They diagnosed me a year before I left. I watched my world shrink. I heard my husband worry more about what my illness would do to his image than to my spine. I left because I refused to spend whatever time I have left being pitted in public and discarded in private." Silence settled over the warehouse. "I didn't lie to fool anyone here," she continued. "I lied so I could live long enough to matter to someone beyond my last name." Jonah stared at her, grief and admiration fighting in his eyes. "You were brave to walk away," he said. "But now you have to be brave enough to stand in your own name. To face them. To take what's yours and use it to protect others." "What would that change?" she whispered. "They already hate me. They already think I'm a traitor." "It changes this," he replied, gesturing to the unfinished walls. "If your name is out there, if the truth about Malik and his mother comes to light, this place becomes more than a secret refuge. It becomes a beacon. It tells other women they don't have to vanish to live." While they argued with fear and hope in that hollow building, the outside world burned hotter. In D.C., the media exploded with leaked documents, accounts, transfers, audio snippets. Prosecutors were investigating Malik and Estelle for money laundering, misusing public funds, and pressuring judges. Talk shows chewed over the scandal. Commentators speculated about Serena's disappearance, some calling it kidnapping, others a calculated escape. In a quiet hotel, Estelle sat across from Jonah. He had agreed to meet her only because she insisted it was urgent. She looked diminished, stripped of the jewelry and armor she used to wear. Her hands shook as she lifted a small glass of water. "I'm not here to redeem myself," she began. "I know what I've done. But you need to know something. Malik, he isn't my biological son." Jonah stiffened. "What?" "I was assaulted when I was 18, she said, the words scraping her throat. "I hid it. Married a man who believed the child was his. I told the same lie for decades. I raised that boy like he was born from love, but darkness leaks through blood sometimes. He is becoming the man who hurt me, and I cannot allow it to pass to another generation in silence." She slid a worn box across the table. Inside were photographs, documents, and a sealed envelope. "There's a girl at your clinic," she said. Lila. Her mother died giving birth. Isn't that right? She's not properly registered. There are coincidences, dates, places, that suggest she could be the granddaughter of the man who hurt me. I don't know for certain. But if it's true, then she is tangled in all of this more deeply than we thought. Jonah left that meeting feeling as if the floor had been removed from beneath him. He had no proof, only pieces of a puzzle that hinted at a twisted family tree. That night, he returned to the warehouse where Serena was cleaning dust and fear from the air. He told her everything. Estelle's confession. The possibility that Lila was part of a lineage neither of them wanted to claim. Serena listened, then turned to the cracked window. I have something else, she said. I've already transferred what's left of my fortune into the name of this foundation. Every property, every account. If they try to come for me, they'll find nothing left to own. Jonah stepped closer. Then we build, he said firmly. We build as fast as we can, as well as we can. Whether you have years or months, we'll make them count. We'll make them echo. For once, she whispered, I want my life to mean more than a headline. Then let it, he replied, taking her hand, not to lead her, but to stand beside her. For the first time, she didn't pull away. The transformation of the warehouse into the Maya Soul Foundation happened faster than anyone thought possible. The neighborhood rallied as if it had been waiting for this task. Men with rough hands and limited schooling mixed cement with a precision no textbook could teach. Women who had survived things they never spoke of painted walls with bright colors instead of faint memories. Every donated tile, every second-hand bed frame, each book placed on a shelf carried a story. The building became a living journal of invisible women finally writing themselves into existence. When the doors opened, there were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no speeches from officials. Just the people who had built it and the ones who needed it. Lila, thin but smiling, carried the scissors to cut the ribbon. Her arms trembled, but her grip was steady. Jonah stood beside Serena, their fingers intertwined briefly before she stepped forward. The halls smelled of fresh paint and hope. Small consultation rooms waited with clean sheets and soft lighting. A shared kitchen gleamed under mismatched lamps. Dorm rooms held simple beds dressed in bright quilts sewn by local volunteers. On one wall, children had painted a mural of women standing shoulder to shoulder, their shadows forming a single wider silhouette. Serena had spent long nights signing documents, finalizing transfers. By the time the foundation opened, she no longer owned anything in her own name. The wealth that had once trapped her in a gilded cage now belonged to a structure made of cracked bricks and unbreakable will. One afternoon, as the sun turned the hallway windows into sheets of gold, a familiar figure appeared near the entrance. No one recognized her except Serena. Estelle Sterling, once a queen of polished events and carefully orchestrated cruelty, stood without makeup or jewelry, her posture bent by a weight that looked heavier than any diamond necklace. She slipped into Lila's room without fanfare, sat by the bed, and stroked the girl's hand with awkward fingers. Her lips moved, forming apologies no one else heard. Lila slept on, unaware. Outside, Serena leaned against the wall, waiting. When Estelle emerged, their eyes met. I knew you would find your way here, Serena said. I'm not here to justify anything, Estelle replied, voice raw. I came to ask for forgiveness, but not for Malik. He made his choices. I'm asking for myself, for the years I watched you fade and said nothing. For hating you because you were what I didn't dare to be. And you expect me to absolve you? Serena asked quietly. No, Estelle said. I expect nothing. I only needed you to know that I saw what I did. To you. To myself. Serena stepped closer, close enough to see the cracks in the other woman's carefully constructed self. I don't forgive you for what you did to me, she said. I forgive you for what you allowed to be done to you. The rest is yours to carry. Estelle broke then, tears carving lines through the powder she hadn't fully washed off. After that day, she began quietly donating her own remaining properties and accounts to the foundation. She slipped into volunteer work at shelters under false names. Slowly, she became a ghost who had chosen solitude not out of pride but penance. On the news, Malik's face filled screens not as a savior of the people, but as a suspect. Corruption charges, bribery allegations, financial violations. Donors ran. Party leaders disowned him publicly. His name, once polished until it shone, now sounded like a warning. As his world crumbled, he did the only thing he knew. Went back to the person he had once believed he owned. He arrived at the foundation gates wearing a suit that no longer fit him right. His hair was less precise, his expensive shoes coated with dust from streets he'd never had to walk before. Serena watched from an upstairs window as he stepped into the courtyard with a briefcase in hand, trying to hold himself like a man still in control. She met him outside, the building at her back, arms folded loosely. There was no anger in her expression, only a distant compassion reserved for lost causes. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. "I want to make a deal." "There are no deals left between us," she answered. "I have documents," he insisted. "Proof I could take to the press. I could say you faked your disappearance to steal everything." "I could." "You're late," she interrupted. "I already stole it. But not the way you think. I took back my dignity. I turned what you wanted to hoard into something you can't touch." "What are you going to do? Attack a shelter for broken women and children on live television?" His jaw clenched. "You don't understand the damage you've done to me." "I understand perfectly," she replied. "For years, you killed me while my heart was still beating. You made me doubt my worth, my body, my right to exist. Now I'm alive. You're drowning in an ocean you dug yourself. It's not my job to throw you a rope." He faltered, then held out the briefcase. "Take it. Evidence that could tie you to some of the money transfers. You're not as clean as." "Keep it," she said. "Whatever I did, I've already written down. I'm not hiding anymore. And tell your mother I heard her. Lila doesn't need to know anything about the man who assaulted her grandmother. She has enough love without that knowledge." She handed him an envelope instead. "This is the last thing I will ever give you," she said. "After this, we are not allies, not enemies. We are nothing." He left without opening it. Only later, alone in a small rented apartment he could barely afford, did he unfold the page. "Power without love is hollow. Money without a soul is decaying. You buried me while I was still alive, and I found a way to rise from that grave. You, however, are still trapped in the coffin of your ego. I won't hate you. I won't fight you. I simply release you. Learn to be alone, Malik. It's the first step toward meeting yourself. The first step toward meeting yourself." That night, Jonah and Serena lay side by side in a narrow bed in a small room at the foundation. It wasn't a night of grand passion, but of intimacy born from shared battles. They didn't rush. They simply lay together, their fingers woven, breathing in rhythm. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "I am at peace," she answered. "Peace doesn't erase fear. It just makes it bearable." "I love you," he said. She didn't answer with words. She guided his hand to her chest, letting him feel the heartbeat that had finally learned to belong only to her. The next morning, he left early to get coffee. When he returned, cups in hand, he found her lying just as he'd left her, mouth curved in the faintest smile. The room felt too still. He set the cups down and touched her arm. Skin, warm but cooling. No rise and fall of breath. He understood without needing anyone to confirm it. Serena had gone quietly without drama, in a room that smelled of disinfectant and sunshine. She had chosen to spend her last night wrapped not in silk, but in the safety of a love that didn't want to own her. He didn't scream. He sat beside her and held her hand until the sun climbed fully over the windowsill. On the small table were 4 envelopes, each with a familiar name written in her looping script. One for him, one for Lila, one for Miss D, one for Estelle. His read, "Don't mourn the years we didn't have. Be grateful for the ones we did. I leave my dream in your hands. Protect it, nurture it, let it grow past both of us. When you doubt yourself, remember this. You saw me when I was invisible. That means your light is stronger than the shadows. Lila's Reed. You taught me that a smile can heal more than medicine. Promise me you'll write your story one day. The world needs to meet the brave girl with the red bracelet who learned to scare fear away. At her request, there was no grand funeral. Her body was cremated. Her ashes were scattered in the garden of the foundation, around the roots of a young almond tree that volunteers planted in her honor. Lila, hair slowly returning in shy curls, promised to water it every morning. On the main wall, where children had painted their mural of united women, a local artist added a new portrait, Serena's face, captured in a wide, gentle smile. Underneath, a line she had once scribbled in her notebook. What changes the world isn't wealth. It's truth wrapped in love. The foundation did not crumble after Serena's death. It did what she had designed it to do. It endured. Women kept arriving at its doors, some with bruises visible, others carrying invisible scars. Children filled the hallways with noise. Volunteers came and went, drawn by the quiet force of a story that refused to end at a grave. For a time, Jonah functioned in survival mode. He treated patients, filled out grant applications, argued with suppliers, and walked through the days like a man carrying both grief and responsibility. At night, he sometimes opened the small locket he wore under his shirt, a gift he had found among her things with a note inside. When you doubt your strength, remember you held my heart steady when it was most afraid. Weeks after her passing, Lila opened a desk drawer in Serena's old office, searching for colored pencils. Instead, she found a thick, neatly bound stack of pages. On the first, written in confident ink, was the title. My husband told me I disgusted him. She brought the manuscript to Jonah. Together, they read the first lines. The voice on the pages was familiar and new at once. Honest, unsparing, sometimes darkly funny. It was not a diary of self-pity, but a map of how someone lost themselves in pleasing others and finally chose to wake up. Jonah read the book in a single night, unable to stop. When he finished, he sat in the empty office and understood that Serena had left him more than memories and a foundation. She had left him a weapon, the kind that cut chains instead of skin. He sent the manuscript to a small independent publisher recommended by a social worker who'd once stayed at the shelter. No one expected what would happen next. The book quietly slipped into the world, printed in a modest first run. Then one woman read it, handed it to a friend, who passed it to a sister, who left it on a break-room table, where another woman picked it up, just to see. The story spread through word of mouth, through group chats and late-night recommendations. Online reviews glowed. People underlined passages and posted them with trembling fingers. Within months, it became a phenomenon. Not because it was sensational, but because it was frighteningly familiar. Each chapter felt like a mirror in which thousands of women saw their own compromises, their own swallowed words. Journalists asked Jonah for interviews. He rarely mentioned Malik by name. Instead, he talked about the foundation, about rebuilding, about how Serena's story was one among many. All profits from the book, according to instructions she had left, flowed directly into expanding the foundation's work. A second Maya Soul House opened in another battered neighborhood. Lila chose its name, the House of the Reborn. She insisted on painting one wall herself, tracing in careful letters the promise Serena had asked of her, write your story. As she grew stronger, Lila did just that. She wrote a children's book about a girl who fought a shadowy monster of gray days using a red bracelet and unshakable laughter. The story traveled to classrooms and living rooms. At festivals and talks, Lila spoke about illness, fear, and how love could grow in the most unlikely soil, like a foundation built in an old warehouse. Jonah remained as the medical director of the expanding network of shelters. There were days when grief still ambushed him, in the shape of a smile on a new resident's face or in the smell of jasmine from a bottle someone donated. When that happened, he stepped into the garden, tracing the line of the almond tree's trunk, feeling how much it had grown. Estelle disappeared from society pages entirely. Rumors floated around that she had joined a small religious community, that she had exiled herself to a foreign town, that she volunteered under a different name in places where no one knew the weight of her old life. What was certain was that she had redirected all she had left to the foundation, quietly ensuring that the money once used to control people now paid for beds, legal aid, and therapy sessions. Malik fell in the opposite direction. The scandals did their work. His party cut him loose. His supporters turned their backs. Attempts at comeback interviews fell flat. He self-published a book where he cast himself as the misunderstood victim of an ambitious wife and a biased system. Few read it. Fewer believed it. Once, years later, Jonah saw him in a small cafe. Malik sat alone at a corner table, shoulders slumped, clothes cheap and rumpled. He looked like a man who had once known exactly who he was supposed to be and now had nothing left to pretend to. Jonah watched for a moment, then turned away. There was no satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement of the truth Serena had written in her last letter. We are not enemies. We are nothing. On the first anniversary of Serena's death, the foundation held a gathering in the garden. Women from different branches traveled to attend. Those who had fled violent homes, those who had left controlling partners, those who had rebuilt their lives starting with nothing but a backpack and a terrified heart. Some brought their children. Some brought stories engraved in their eyes. They lit candles instead of releasing balloons. One by one, women stepped forward to speak. They didn't hide their faces. They didn't whisper. They talked about nights spent on cold floors, about words that had cut deeper than fists, about the first time they walked through the foundation's doors and felt something like oxygen return. At the end, a woman who had traveled the farthest took the microphone. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I was invisible, she said, looking at the mural of Serena's smiling face. Until I read her story. Until I realized that leaving wasn't proof of weakness, but of courage. Serena didn't really die. She woke up to me. In all of us. Lila squeezed Jonah's hand and whispered, Do you think she sees us? He looked at the tree, at the mural, at the women wiping tears and laughing in the same breath. I don't know where she is, he answered softly. But I know where she lives. In every woman who refuses to go back to sleep. Later, as the sky darkened and candles burned low, Lila opened a notebook of her own. On the first page, in her messy, determined handwriting, she wrote, This is not the story of a woman who disappeared. It's the story of one who finally stepped into the light, and showed the rest of us the way. Words, she had learned from Serena, could heal. They could also rebuild worlds. And somewhere, in the quiet space beyond regret and fear, the woman once known as Serena Rhodes, once called too much and not enough, lived on. Not in marble, not in headlines, but in every act of courage sparked by the truth she left behind.